In the previous example, I looked at an Android app that used a countdown timer to simulate the rolling of a single die. And this time I just want to extend that slightly to the rolling of 5 dice, like in the first roll of Yahtzee. The code can be found at the URL seen here. Okay, so in this case, instead of just having 1 die, now I have 5 die and a button. So I put the dice, the image views, into a linear layout with the horizontal orientation. So here we are in activity _ main XML, the layout. And so I have a linear layout. And there's the end of the linear layout. So the dice are in linear layout with the horizontal orientation. And then I just have image views, and then I've named them consecutively, IV die 0, IV die 1. I have 4. I go up to 4. So I have 5 dice, and so I go up to from IV die 0 to IV die 1, anticipating sort of using an array. So starting with a 0. Okay, and then I have a button. Okay, so over in main, previously I had a global variable for the value of the die, and now I've made that an array and given it an initial value. Okay, then I'm connecting to the interface here, and right now I'm only connecting. I'm going to connect to the images sort of on the fly in a loop, and so I am only connecting here to the button roll and then setting up its click event. When I'm going to set up a timer to sort of simulate the rolling die repeatedly, and I want to set that up within the button roll and don't want to end up with multiple timers. So I'm disabling the button. So button roll is enabled equals false. Disable the button until at the very end. When the timer is done, then we'll re-enable it. And then one can't click the button while a timer is going. So we're not going to end up with multiple timers here. Okay, so we're starting off with the timer. And as discussed in the previous example, the countdown timer has 2 times, an overall time where it's going to be in play. In this case, that's 2000 milliseconds or 2 seconds. And then an interval, a time for repeating, that sort of a repeating behavior. And that's at 100 milliseconds or a tenth of a second. The on-tick method is the repeating method. So that's going to be called every 100 milliseconds. And I'm here looping from 0 to 4. I'm looping through, just using a basic counter, but looping through, I'm going to be basically looping through my dice. And I'm going to grab a widget, grab the image view, and then I'm going to get a random number, and I'm going to get the corresponding drawable resource corresponding to that number, and then put that drawable resource into that image view. Okay, so here I'm working with the resources. I'm concatenating together with my counter IV die, which was the name of the resource. It was an ID, and I'm working within just generically the package name. Okay, and then I'm find the view by the ID based on that widget ID. And so now I have the image view. I have an array of dice values. So I'm in my dice square bracket this is the ith dice, and I'm getting a random number between 1 and 6. And I'm going to play a similar game with the resources, but this time the drawable resource. And you see one difference here is I have this sort of, when I'm working with just the counter I have this sort of slicker way of concatenating, of sort of doing sort of what in JavaScript would be called a template literal And so I can just sort of substitute the variable straight into here. Whereas once with my dice and it became an array, then I was forced to do a sort of a more old-fashioned concatenation. But here I'm concatenating I to IV die, working within the IDs to find the widget, and then I'm working with die and the random number that I drew, and looking in the drawable resources to get the corresponding drawable resource, and then sort of marrying the two together, making that drawable resource the image for that image view. And I'm going to be repeatedly doing that on the tick, which we saw. Did we see? Click the button and sort of repeatedly change the elements, and then I get some roll. And in the game of Yahtzee, I would have some way of choosing which the dice I want to keep and which ones I want to re-roll. We're not doing that here. We're just doing the first roll. So all 5 must be rolled. Okay. So that was the on tick. That is the repeating part. When it's done, all I'm doing here is re-enabling the button so I can roll again. And then, of course, don't forget to start the timer. So if you set all this timer stuff up and then don't start the timer, then nothing happens. There's the end of the click and the end of on create and the end of my class. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you. There's nothing new, just sort of bringing some things together that perhaps we haven't seen in a while.